You won't believe what happened when the FBI's most wanted hacker vanished into thin air. Living under a fake identity while simultaneously breaking into the networks of America's biggest corporations right under their noses. This is the shocking true story of how one man became a digital ghost, how he made the critical mistake that turned his greatest rival into his worst enemy, and how the FBI launched the most intense electronic manhunt in history to bring him down. What you're about to discover will leave you absolutely stunned. February 15th, 1995, 1:30 in the morning, Raleigh, North Carolina. Team of FBI agents surrounded a modest apartment complex, their weapons drawn, their hearts pounding. Inside that building was a man who had eluded them for years, a digital phantom who had penetrated some of the most secure computer systems on the planet. They called him the most dangerous hacker in the world. His name was Kevin Mitnick. But here's what makes this story absolutely incredible. The man they were about to arrest was on some basement-dwelling loner. He was hiding in plain sight, working regular jobs, living under an alias, all while conducting one of the most audacious hacking sprees in American history. And the way they finally caught him, it involved a bitter rivalry, a revolutionary tracking technique, and a 2-week electronic manhunt that would change cybersecurity forever. You see, this isn't just a story about catching a hacker. This is a story about obsession, about revenge, about the thin line between genius and criminal, and about how one man's curiosity turned into a federal nightmare that would cost him 5 years of his freedom. But before we dive into the dramatic arrest and the intense manhunt, you need to understand who Kevin Mitnick really was, and why he became the FBI's #1 target. Because what he did and how he did it will shock you. Kevin Mitnick didn't start out as America's most wanted hacker. He started as a curious kid with an insatiable appetite for understanding how systems worked. Born in 1963, young Kevin grew up in Los Angeles, and from an early age, he displayed an extraordinary talent for manipulating systems and people. His first taste of hacking wasn't even digital. It was social. As a teenager, he became obsessed with the phone system, learning to manipulate it in ways that would make your jaw drop. This was the era of phone phreaking, and Kevin was a natural. He would dumpster dive for technical manuals. He would sweet-talk employees into giving him access codes. He would become whoever he needed to be to get the information he wanted. Think about that for a second. While other kids were playing video games, Kevin was engineering his way into one of the most complex communication networks on Earth. And was doing it with nothing but his voice, his charm, and his incredibly sharp mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. Kevin discovered something that would become his signature weapon. He realized that the weakest link in any security system wasn't the technology, it was the people. He became a master of what we now call social engineering, the art of manipulating human psychology to bypass security measures. Let me paint you a picture of how this worked. Kevin would call up a company, pretending to be a manager or a technician. He would use technical jargon. He would create urgency. He would build trust. And then, almost like magic, employees would hand over passwords, access codes, proprietary information. They never suspected a thing. By the late 1980s, Kevin had already been convicted once for hacking into the Digital Equipment Corporation's network. He served a year in prison and 3 years of supervised release. But did that stop him? Absolutely not. It only made him more careful, more sophisticated, more determined. And this is where our story really begins. 'Cause when Kevin was released, he didn't reform. Instead, he went underground. He became a fugitive, and he embarked on a hacking spree that would target some of the biggest names in technology. We're talking about Motorola, Nokia, Fujitsu, Sun Microsystems, Novell. These weren't small companies. These were tech giants. And Kevin was breaking into their networks, stealing source code, copying proprietary software, accessing their most sensitive research and development files. But wait till you see what happened next, because things are about to get even more intense. But here's the thing that made Kevin so dangerous, so difficult to catch. He wasn't doing this for money. He wasn't selling the information. He wasn't destroying systems. K was doing it for the thrill, for the challenge, for the sheer joy of proving he could outsmart anyone. And that made him unpredictable. That made him terrifying. And it also made him careless. While the FBI was hunting for Kevin Mitnick, adding him to their most wanted list, treating him like a cyber terrorist, Kevin was doing something absolutely audacious. He was living right under their noses. Picture this. Kevin adopted the alias Eric Weiss, a name inspired by Harry Houdini's birth name. And under this identity, he wasn't hiding in some dark bunker surrounded by computers. No, he was living a seemingly normal life. He got a job at a law firm in Denver. Later, he worked at a hospital. His coworkers knew him as their resident computer expert, their go-to guy for tech problems. Oh, the irony is almost poetic, isn't it? The FBI's most wanted hacker was fixing printers and troubleshooting email issues during the day, while at night he was penetrating the most secure computer networks in America. But Kevin wasn't just maintaining his cover. He was actively expanding his criminal empire. During this period, from late 1992 through 1995, Kevin was on an unprecedented hacking rampage. He was breaking into systems belonging to telecommunications companies, computer manufacturers, software developers. He was stealing thousands of data files, downloading proprietary source code, copying software that companies had spent millions developing. The FBI estimated that Kevin's activities cost these companies millions of dollars in damages. But here's what's controversial. Kevin always maintained that he never profited from any of this. He never sold the code. He never used it for financial gain. He was, in his own mind, just exploring, just learning, just satisfying his curiosity. Think about that for a moment. Here was a man with the technical skills to steal millions, to sell corporate secrets to the highest bidder, to become incredibly wealthy through cybercrime. And yet, according to him, he was just in it for the intellectual challenge. Was he a criminal mastermind or a misguided genius? Was he a dangerous threat to national security or a curious explorer in the digital frontier? The FBI saw him as the former. Kevin saw himself as the latter. And this fundamental disagreement would shape everything that happened next. During this time, Kevin was using cutting-edge techniques that most people had never even heard of. He was cloning cell phones to avoid being traced. He was using false identification documents. He was constantly moving, constantly changing his patterns, constantly staying one step ahead. He had created a digital fortress around himself, sophisticated encryption. He routed his connections through multiple servers. He employed techniques that wouldn't become common knowledge for years. He was, quite literally, a man ahead of his time. But even the most careful criminals make mistakes. And Kevin's mistake, it was about to change everything. He was about to cross the wrong person. He was about to hack into the computer of someone who would unjust report it to the authorities. Someone who would make it his personal mission to hunt Kevin down. Someone who had the skills, the resources, and the determination to end Kevin's run once and for all. And when these two hackers collided, when Kevin made the fateful decision to break into this man's personal computer, he set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the most intense electronic manhunt in FBI history. A manhunt that would involve revolutionary tracking techniques. A manhunt that would blur the lines between legal investigation and illegal surveillance. A manhunt that would end with armed agents surrounding that apartment in Raleigh in the middle of the night. But that's not all. Wait till you see what happened next, because the identity of this rival hacker will blow your mind. His name was Tsutomu Shimomura, and he was not someone you wanted as an enemy. Shimomura was a computational physicist working at the San Diego Supercomputer Center. But he wasn't just any researcher. He was a security expert, a brilliant technologist in his own right, someone who understood computer systems at the deepest levels. He was respected, well-connected, and he had friends in very high places. On Christmas Day, 1994, something unprecedented happened. Someone broke into Shimomura's personal computer system. They didn't just break in. They used a revolutionary technique called IP spoofing. It's a method so advanced that most security experts didn't even know it was possible at the time. IP spoofing involves using a fake IP address to disguise your identity during an intrusion. It's like showing up at someone's door wearing a mask that makes you look like their trusted friend. The technique was theoretical. It was cutting edge. And someone had just used it to humiliate Tsutomu Shimomura. Shimomura was furious. Not just because his system had been breached, but because the intruder had stolen his personal files, his security tools, his research. It was a violation. It was a challenge. It was personal. And Shimomura was convinced that the intruder was Kevin Mitnick. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Shimomura didn't just report this to the authorities and wait for them to handle it. Oh no, he made it his personal mission to track down whoever had hacked him. He contacted the FBI. He offered his expertise, and together they launched what would become the most technologically sophisticated manhunt of the 1990s. But the FBI wasn't just hunting Kevin because he hacked Shimomura's computer. Remember, Kevin was already a fugitive. He was already wanted for violating probation from his earlier convictions. He was already suspected in dozens of major corporate hacks. The Shimomura incident was just the catalyst, the spark that turned a slow-burning investigation into a raging inferno. Shimomura began analyzing the intrusion. He studied the techniques used, He looked for patterns, for fingerprints, for any clue that could lead him to the hacker. And slowly, methodically, he began to piece together a profile. Meanwhile, Kevin had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake of his hacking career. He continued his activities, breaking into more systems, collecting more data, living his double life. But the net was closing in. Shimomura worked with telecommunications companies. He worked with the FBI. He used sophisticated monitoring techniques to trace the hackers' activities. And in early February 1995, they got their first real break. They detected unusual cellular activity in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. Someone was using cloned cell phones. Someone was accessing computer systems through cellular connections. Someone was exhibiting patterns consistent with Kevin Mitnick's known methods. Shimomura flew to North Carolina. He brought specialized equipment, antennas designed to track cellular signals. And he began driving through the streets of Raleigh, searching for the source of those signals. It was like something out of a spy thriller, a brilliant hacker using cutting-edge technology to hunt down an even more elusive hacker. For 2 weeks, they searched. They monitored signals. They triangulated positions. They narrowed down the possibilities. And finally, on February 14th, Valentine's Day, they pinpointed the location. An apartment complex in Raleigh. They had found him. But arresting Kevin Mitnick wouldn't be simple. The FBI was terrified of what he might do if he got wind of their approach. There were wild rumors, almost mythological, about Kevin's capabilities. Could he launch missiles with a whistle into a phone? Could he access NORAD systems? Could he start a war with a few keystrokes? Of course, these rumors were absurd, completely unfounded. But they show you how much fear and misunderstanding surrounded Kevin Mitnick. He had become a legend, a boogeyman, the personification of every fear society had about the growing digital world. February 15th, 1995, 1:30 a.m. The FBI agents moved into position. They had planned this carefully. No warning. No chance for Kevin to destroy evidence or, in their minds, launch some kind of digital attack. They knocked on the door, and when it opened, there stood Kevin Mitnick. After years of running, after countless narrow escapes, after living as a ghost in the machine, his run was over. The agents arrested him on the spot. And what they found in his apartment confirmed their worst suspicions. More than 100 cloned cellular phone codes, false identification documents, cloned phone hardware, and evidence of intrusions into dozens of major corporations. But here's what's fascinating. When they arrested Kevin, he didn't fight. He didn't resist. In some ways, it seemed like he was almost relieved. The pressure of living as a fugitive, the constant paranoia, the isolation it had taken its toll. Kevin was taken into custody. He was charged with wire fraud, possession of unauthorized access devices, interception of wire or electronic communications, and unauthorized access to computer systems. The charges were serious. The prosecution treated him like a supervillain, arguing that he had caused millions of dollars in damages and posed a serious threat to national security. And here's where the story takes another dramatic turn. The judge was so afraid of Kevin's supposed capabilities that he ordered him held without bail. More than that, for 8 months, Kevin was held in solitary confinement. Why? Because the judge believed that if Kevin had access to a phone, any phone, even the payphones in the jail, he could hack his way out or cause untold damage. Think about that. They were so terrified of him that they denied him one of the most basic privileges of incarceration: communication with the outside world. For 8 months, Kevin sat alone in a cell, cut off from everyone, treated like a terrorist. All because of the mystique and fear surrounding his reputation. The media had a field day. Kevin Mitnick became front-page news. Some portrayed him as a dangerous criminal who had compromised American security. Others portrayed him as a misunderstood genius who had been demonized by a justice system that did understand technology. The truth, as always, was somewhere in between. Tsutomu Shimomura and a journalist named Ko Murov co-wrote a book about the chase called Takedown. They received a $750,000 advance. The book painted Kevin as a malicious hacker, a real threat to society. Kevin and his supporters cried foul, arguing that the book was full of exaggerations and outright fabrications. The controversy reached a fever pitch. Was Kevin really as dangerous as they claimed? Or was he a scapegoat, a convenient villain in a society that was just beginning to grapple with the implications of the digital age? In 1999, after years of legal battles, Kevin Mitnick pleaded guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of computer fraud, and 1 count of illegally intercepting a wire communication. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison with credit for time served. But here's the kicker. The actual financial damages Kevin caused were far less than what had been reported. The millions of dollars in losses that prosecutors claimed, much of it was inflated based on the cost of investigating his activities rather than actual damages from his hacking. Kevin served his time. And when he was released in the year 2000, he was forbidden from using computers or the internet for 3 years as part of his parole conditions. Can you imagine? A man whose entire identity was tied to technology, banned from the very thing he loved most. But Kevin Mitnick's story doesn't end in tragedy. In fact, it takes a remarkable turn. After his release, after serving his time, after being demonized and vilified, Kevin did something incredible. He reinvented himself. He became a security consultant. The same corporations he had once hacked now hired him to test their security systems. He founded his own company, Mitnick Security Consulting, which helped businesses protect themselves against the very techniques he had pioneered. He became a best-selling author, writing books about social engineering and security awareness. He became a sought-after public speaker, sharing his story and his insights at conferences around the world. Think about the irony. The FBI's most wanted hacker, The man who had cost companies millions. The man who had been treated like a digital terrorist was now being paid by those same types of companies to break into their systems legally. He was using his skills for good, teaching others about vulnerabilities, helping to make the digital world more secure. Kevin always maintained that he was never malicious. He never destroyed data. He never used his access for financial gain. He was, in his own words, just curious, fascinated by the challenge of breaking through security systems, just addicted to the thrill of outsmarting the experts. Was he a criminal? Absolutely. He broke laws, he violated trust, he caused real harm to real companies. There's no question about that. But was he the dangerous cyber terrorist that the FBI and the media made him out to be? That's a much more complicated question. Kevin Mitnick became a symbol of the growing conflict between individual freedom and corporate security. A symbol of how society struggles to understand and regulate new technologies. A symbol of how fear and misunderstanding can turn a person into a monster, regardless of the reality. Today, Kevin Mitnick's legacy is complex. To some, he's a cautionary tale about the consequences of breaking the law, no matter how noble your intentions might seem. To others, he's a hero, a rebel who exposed the vulnerabilities in systems that claimed to be secure, who showed that the emperor had no clothes. But perhaps the most important lesson from Kevin Mitnick's story isn't about hacking at all. It's about human nature. It's about how our curiosity can lead us down dangerous paths. It's about how our fear of what we don't understand can lead to injustice. It's about how even our mistakes can become opportunities for redemption. The FBI's hunt for Kevin Mitnick was the most intensive electronic manhunt of its time. It pioneered techniques that are now standard in cybercrime investigations. It brought together law enforcement, private researchers, and telecommunications companies in unprecedented cooperation. And it raised questions about privacy, surveillance, and the limits of investigative power that we're still debating today. Tsutomu Shimomura's role in the chase remains controversial. Some see him as a hero who helped bring a criminal to justice. Others see him as someone who crossed ethical lines, who let personal revenge drive what should have been a purely professional investigation. And what about the techniques the FBI used to catch Kevin? There are allegations that they violated federal wiretapping statutes in their eagerness to track him down. Kevin was never charged with hacking Shimomura's computer, possibly because doing so would have exposed the FBI's questionable methods. The truth is, the story of how the FBI caught America's greatest hacker is a simple tale of good versus evil. It's a story of complicated people making complicated choices in a world that was changing faster than anyone could keep up with. Kevin Mitnick passed away in July 2023 at the age of 59. By then, he had spent more than 2 decades as a respected security expert, a reformed hacker who used his knowledge to help others. He had built a legitimate career, earned respect in the cybersecurity community, and proved that people can change, can grow, can redeem themselves. His story reminds us that the line between genius and criminal, between curiosity and crime, between exploration and exploitation, is often thinner than we'd like to believe. It reminds us that in our rush to judge, to condemn, to punish, we might miss the opportunity to understand, to learn, to forgive. The hunt for Kevin Mitnick changed cybersecurity forever. It showed us that our digital systems were vulnerable. It proved that social engineering was as dangerous as any technical exploit. It demonstrated that catching digital criminals required new tools, new techniques, and new ways of thinking. And what it gave us a story that continues to fascinate, to inspire, and to warn us about the incredible power and the incredible responsibility that comes with our ever-expanding digital world. If this story shocked you, if it made you think differently about hackers, security, or the justice system, make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe for more incredible true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Drop a comment and let me know, was Kevin Mitnick a criminal mastermind or a misunderstood genius? Should he have been treated as harshly as he was? And what do you think about his transformation from FBI's most wanted to respected security consultant? The truth is out there, waiting to be discovered. Just like Kevin Mitnick once discovered the secrets hidden in the world's most secure systems. And just like the FBI discovered that catching a ghost in the machine requires becoming part of that machine yourself. Thanks for watching. This has been the shocking true story of how the FBI caught America's greatest hacker. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.